That is an absolute no-go. That is a horrible policy design for infinite banking. You want to see immediate cash value in your policy if you're trying to do infinite banking. So that's the first red flag. If you're looking at the policy and it's like, dude, I don't have any cash value in here, that's when you know it's not set up properly. So when you're working with someone, the first thing where my eyes, or one of the first things where my eyes goes is like, I want to see that I have cash value in there. And also, depending on how the policy's set up and your goals, you can set up the policy to where you can have upwards of 80–90% of your first year premium available in cash value almost immediately to access, usually within the first 30 business days. So again, when you're working with your agent and depending on your goals, if you're someone who wants to start using your policy as soon as possible, maybe you're a real estate investor, for example, and you're like, hey, I want to put money in this thing and I want to start using it as quickly as I can, that your agent's going to need to know how to set up the policy to where you're maximizing the cash value up front. And again, if you don't see any cash value or very little cash value in the beginning, that's usually a huge red flag. And why is that a red flag? So not only are you not getting access to cash value, the other thing is that the agent in that scenario is making a lot more commission than they would if they set up the policy to favor you to give you the most cash value. So think about it like this. The more cash value you have, the less money the agent made in commission setting up the policy. The more commission the agent makes means the less cash value you have in your policy. So if you see a big fat zero in year one of your policy and you put in $10,000 year one, I mean, your agent might have made 90% of that, $9,000, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on their commission structure, but 90% of first year premium is pretty standard. So just know that, and that's very important to ask questions too. So that leads into the next thing is ask your agent how they're getting compensated and how much. Like, I do not have a problem disclosing what I'm making on my policy and or what I'm going to be making on a policy. And I think, you as a policyholder, a consumer, you have 100% right to ask that question. Again, transparency is key with everything, but especially in the life insurance space, like, you deserve to know all the ins and outs if you choose to ask that. Now, not everyone, like, I don't have everyone asking me, oh, what are you gonna get paid on this? But when people do ask, I have no problem sharing that. It's like, I have nothing to hide. And your agent should be the same way. If they're trying to hide, what they're making on it, it's like, why are you hiding? Like, what else are you hiding from me? Because if they're trying to hide that, there's most likely something else that they're hiding from you that they don't want you to know. So that's another thing. Just, I would ask your agent, how they're being compensated and what that looks like. It's not a huge deal, but don't be afraid to ask that. The other thing I would make sure is that whoever you're working with, make sure they have a policy themselves and that they are actually practicing or intending to practice the concept, because it's like, what's the concept I'm looking for? You don't want to work with a barefoot shoe salesman. I mean, that's my opinion. Now, there are some cases where it's like, okay, the salesperson or the person helping out they don't need to be a product of the product. But in this case, for infinite banking, I think it's really important for the agent to have a policy themselves and actively be using it, or at least be intending to use it at some point in the future. Because that's very important. Because if the agent is in the weeds doing it themselves, I mean, they're going to be right there with you when you have questions for when you want to utilize your policy. Okay, now, that's just my opinion. I think that's very important. Others might disagree, but I think the agent should have a policy themselves, specifically for infinite banking. So that's another thing just to make sure of. The next thing I want to talk about is, and again, don't be afraid to ask your agent, it's just transparency around fees of the policy, transparency around all of the moving pieces, should you want to know that. Okay, don't feel like, oh, I'm being too nosy or I'm being a pain by asking all these, fine print details. Like, if you're someone where your brain, if you're like engineer minded, you're like, I want to know all the moving pieces, I want to know how it all comes together, don't be afraid to ask that. Like, when I was getting my first policy, or my whole life insurance policy set up for infinite banking, I asked so many questions because I'm like, I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. I'm putting my hard-earned money into this. I want to understand for myself, you know, how this all works. And there's nothing wrong with that. Don't have any shame in that, because there are a lot of moving pieces. If you watch a lot of my other videos on the channel, I have a lot of technical videos for those of you who are technical and you want to understand, you know, how infinite banking works. How do whole life insurance policies need to be designed for infinite banking? There's a lot that goes into it. Now, if you're someone that's just like, I don't really care about the moving pieces. I trust you. I know that you know how to do it, and I just want to focus on the outcome that I'm gonna get, then hats off to you. But for those of you who wanna know and you wanna see behind the curtain and see what's actually happening, then ask those questions. And you know, that leads into another thing is don't be afraid to shop around and speak with multiple agents. I would not be offended if you sat down with me, you picked my brain and you asked all these questions and you're like, you know what, I wanna go talk to this person, I wanna go to talk to that person. I would actually encourage doing that, and I don't have a problem with that at all, and that wouldn't offend me in any other way. As long as you're getting value and you understand what you're getting yourself into potentially, and you know for yourself, it's not through someone else telling you, and you did your own due diligence and you came to your own conclusions, like that's what matters at the end of the day. Obviously, I would prefer if we worked together, but if you said, hey, you know what, this was great, I got a lot of value from you, but I'm gonna go, you know, work with someone else or at least shop around before, you know, deciding if I wanna work with you, I think that's a great thing to do and you should totally do it. There's nothing wrong with getting second opinions, especially when you're, again, putting your hard-earned money into something. So if you're newer to infinite banking, or maybe this is your first time ever even hearing of it, just know this is a long-term strategy. This isn't something, it's not a get rich quick. It's not something you're gonna be able to reap fruits from immediately. Like the first handful of years is really gonna be the startup phase of this concept. And then once you get into, you know, years 5, 7, 10 and beyond is where you really start to see your policy picking up momentum. And that's where you'll see the infinite banking concept or strategy in full force. So just know this is a long-term strategy and you need to be thinking long-term with it. Like for example, I spent probably 18 months, close to 18 months, really learning the ins and outs of infinite banking, of whole life insurance before I even got my own policy. Now it's a bit different, you know, I am an agent, so, and I help people do this, so I need to know a lot more than just like, hey, I wanna get a policy. But even take the agent hat off, I'm like, dude, I'm putting my hard-earned money into this. I need to know exactly what's going on here. I need to know, you know, all the moving pieces. Again, that's how my brain's wired when I'm dealing with things financially. It's like, I work hard for my money as you do. It's like you deserve to know what you want to know. And again, some of you might not be hardwired that way to need to know all the fine print, but for those of you who are, totally okay, and I would encourage you to ask questions and understand for yourself. Because if you're not comfortable and if someone's pressuring you into getting a policy, it's like that's a recipe for a disaster on both ends. So take your time with it, ask those questions, do your own research, get second opinions, third opinions, and then come to the conclusion of like, or when you do feel ready rather, then you know you can continue pursuing getting a policy potentially. So that's really what I would encourage there. And the other thing for you guys out there considering a policy for infinite banking is stay away from hype. There is a lot of noise and there's a lot of hype within the life insurance space, but specifically when it comes to infinite banking. I made another video about this not too long ago saying you should never use an IUL for infinite banking. Infinite banking needs to have a stable foundation, period. If you read, again, the book I mentioned in the beginning of the video, Becoming Your Own Banker by Nelson Nash, it talks about whole life insurance in there. And the biggest reason is because it's safe, it's predictable, it's guaranteed, and it doesn't have any moving pieces in it when you compare it to like an IUL, which has a lot of moving pieces and that can completely derail your whole plan for infinite banking. So I bring that up because there tends to be a lot of hype around index universal life and whole life as well. I'm not gonna just put IULs in a corner there, but typically you'll see a lot of hype around IULs. But if anyone's just like over the top charismatic. And I'm not talking about being passionate, because I can get very, very passionate when it comes to talking about life insurance, infinite banking, but you'll see what I'm talking about. Like, there's people that are just way overselling it and basically positioning it as the end all be all, the best thing since sliced bread. And I would be very cautious of that, because typically with people positioning it that way, that's usually where they're not practicing it themselves. They don't know the fundamentals as an agent. They don't know all the moving pieces. They don't know all the fine, minute details that all need to be in place to really make sure the policy and this whole concept is going to just be congruent to work the most efficiently as possible. And that's usually where they're setting it up in a way, like we talked about in the beginning, where they're making the most commission possible, and you, the policyholder, is going to have the least amount of cash value, which defeats the whole purpose of doing it.